The history of the legend of the Pony of Shadows is quite an interesting one. Originally being brought up in the episode Castle Mania, it was introduced as a mysterious supernatural force roaming the abandoned castle of the two sisters. In that same episode, we catch a glimpse of what is ostensibly the Pony of Shadows, however later implied to be the character of Tyrek in his weakened state. The question of what the Pony of Shadows truly was left behind for years until the episode Shadowplay. It was revealed that the Pony of Shadows was in fact the nightmare form of the character Stygian, temporarily defeated by Starswell the Bearded. Given how the Pony of Shadows was entrapped within the dimension referred to as Limbo, this leaves a gap of over 1,000 years prior to its return, in which case the Pony of Shadows described by Applejack is clearly a separate entity. But is this a case of legends evolving over time, or did the story of the Pony of Shadows accidentally become blended with another more local legend? Is there any truth to the story of something mysterious dwelling within the desolate castle? The core of the legend revolves around the castle of the two sisters. As such, whether the legend itself has a grain of truth to it kind of depends on whether there could be any possible eyewitnesses to this phenomenon. On the face of it, the answer would seem to be no, since the Everfree forest where the castle currently lies has a strong enough reputation as to dissuade visitors. However, this state does not reflect the castle as it would have been for the years after it was abandoned. It is not unlikely that many curious locals and visitors may have paid the castle a visit over the years before the Everfree claimed it. Indeed, studying canon maps of Equestria reveals that the castle is in fact situated on the very edge of the forest, thus making it easy to reach if you sidestep the more dangerous sections. This latter supposition is supported by the episode The Mean Six, in which our main characters travel to the site of the castle without running into a single Everfree threat. The implication is that some sections of the forest are much safer than others. Given how the legend is far from recent, not to mention being at least somewhat well known, it would seem the idea of some pony encountering such a being is not completely out of the question. Topics such as Nightmare Moon and the Pony of Shadows would likely have been somewhat fresh in the minds of ponies around 1,000 years ago. Therefore, it makes sense for the two to become blended given their similarity. But what prompted this connection? Was there something living in the castle ruins that could only be explained this way by its eyewitnesses? Chances are the legend itself is just that, a legend. But if we're to infer that such an entity actually existed, what could it have been? Based on what is known about the subject in question, 3 explanations of the story come to light. The original explanation behind the existence of the Pony of Shadows would likely have been an attempt at connecting the being to the place it was sighted. But could there have been any truth to the theory? As yet, not enough is known about equestrian magic to say either way. It is interesting to note, in regards to Nightmare Moon, that after capturing Princess Celestia, according to Lauren Faust anyway, she was too weak to directly attack the main 6. Maybe she had lost some of her magic. Or more likely she only had a limited amount after using most of it to escape the moon's gravity and subdue her sister. The bigger question is whether pure magic can actually take on a life of its own. As such, for the time being, this explanation remains up in the air. Returning to the original Pony of Shadows, current speculation is that said entity was what has come to be known as a nightmare or shadow, a parasitic being that feeds off of intense negative emotion. Though the current theory holds that said creatures are created internally, the case with Stygian seems to indicate a possible external source. Is it possible for there to be other, similar, possibly smaller life forms living within places such as the Everfree forest. Given the fact that such creatures feed off of negative emotion, the castle of the two sisters would not be a bad choice for a feeding ground. In this scenario, comparisons to the original Pony of Shadows would be inevitable, thus explaining the name's reuse. But if that were true, is such a creature still residing there to this day? It is many times surprising just how often the fields of parapsychology and cryptozoology intersect. The issue of whether ghosts exist in Equestria has been raised before by the Society. However, for this we are going to go into it a little more in depth. At its core, a ghost is merely a personified human interpretation of certain paranormal phenomena, including poltergeists, stone tapes, and physical manifestations. Interestingly, such phenomena are not completely unknown to the show. The popular and obvious example of something paranormal is Pinkie Pie, who appears to show a form of foresight known as the Pinkie Sense. However, this ability appears to have degraded over time, likely due to aging. A more relevant example is in the hallway painting from Castlemania, which is shown to have a life of its own. No in-universe explanations have been raised to rationalize this, mostly because it was only revealed to the audience. The last example in our current case files originates from the first part of Shadowplay, in which the 6 pillars of Equestria are projected before the main 6. This occurs due to the effect of the spell they cast on the surrounding environment, causing their last minutes to be preserved within the surrounding stones. In parapsychology, this phenomenon is referred to under the stone tape theory. As yet, there is still little evidence that ghosts exist within the world of Equestria, at least in the traditional sense. However, we can confirm the presence of paranormal occurrences. As such, what exists in the field of parapsychology that might explain such an entity? Shadow people, or shadow figures, are a mystery in themselves. Appearing often as pitch-black silhouettes and other times as transparent three-dimensional shadows, numerous theories have been put forward to explain their occurrence. These range from demons to interdimensional beings. Given how fictional entities like Slender Man have been seen in the show, it does not seem impossible for more real-world entities such as shadow beings to exist in-universe. Knowing how such entities are recorded as specifically targeting the emotionally vulnerable, it makes sense that the main 6 have been left alone up until this point. Even Fluttershy, for her connection to the elements, would likely be seen as a threat to such an entity's existence. Question is that still true now that the elements have been affected by the mean 6?